free after, so let's get started and let's hope others will join in. If you haven't already, put your name in the meeting minutes, and yeah, let's get started. So welcome everybody. This is the Meshery development meeting. Today is April 14th, and without wasting any time, let's get started with the first item on our agenda. So Aditi, I guess you're up.
Hey everyone, good morning or good evening. So I'll just talk about my current PR, which is deleting resources on system stop when Meshery is running on platform Kubernetes. So I'll just walk. I'll just tell about what I learned through this PR. So when I first started with this PR, by the way, this was my most daunting PR till date. I wasn't sure how exactly to proceed, and hence there was quite a bit of delay in me starting. Once I understood how the internals worked, when the platform is Kubernetes worked, I mistakenly used client Go and deleted all the custom resources individually after looking at the Meshery operator. But thanks to Abhishek, he told me that I could just use the existing meshkit cube and meshkit utils functions, and that would delete the resources for me if I just provided the URL. Now, now from this issue, there is another possible opportunity. One is instead of just hard coding the URL, the way Meshery namespace and other Meshery wide details have been specified in utils helpers.go. We could specify all the operator file URLs, and as you can see from a review, Meshery name the name Meshery can also be we can also remove that hard code the way namespace has been removed. I'm sorry I can't demo this to you using Kubernetes because the alternate laptop I'm using doesn't have K8s installed. My primary laptop crashed. So to sum it up, I think in this PR I just explored Meshkit utils more carefully, and next time I think instead of directly using the client libraries, I'll explore what the Meshkit resources better. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Aditi. I guess. Oh, is this PR ready to review?
Yes, Abhishek has reviewed it and he said
Okay.
he's approved the changes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Any other comments?
Yeah, Aditi, in part, I think the question about review in that you did a fantastic, actually, yeah, I see it now, you updated. So you did a fantastic job of identifying work in progress in the subject of the PR. And then you also used the draft flag to signal that work was in flight. So that's perfect. That didn't stop anyone from giving you feedback, but so that worked out. That works out very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get you a Kubernetes sticker in the mail, maybe for that laptop that doesn't have Kubernetes. We'll,
Thank you.
just slap it on the outside. So did we? So one of the open questions in this particular PR was whether or not it was time to centralize some of the configuration or externalize some of the configuration with respect to the namespace in which Meshery is deployed in Kubernetes. By default, that namespace is called Meshery. And, it would it'll be very few and far in between the case that an organization or user that's deploying Meshery would, excuse me, want to change. Maybe I shouldn't say very few and far in between, but like it's not the typical use case. I would say there might be organizations that like to namespace apps like Meshery into a management namespace or something like that. Or maybe they have a naming convention where they prepend someone's name or some project name with then the name of the app, in this case, Meshery. And so understanding that there, while it might not be the 80%, like there are some individuals who might want to customize that. And I'm probably conflating two things. So I guess maybe first question is, Aditi, do you know if, so like if today, if someone had deployed Meshery into a different namespace, would we be in trouble in terms of stopping Meshery with this command?
I I don't think so, because if at all I refer to it, I always refer to it with utils dot meshery namespace. So
Gotcha.
and, and I don't remember referring to it in the URL. It's just the operator URL. If you ask me, we should find a way to remove this operator URL hard code.
Yeah, operator URL. Yep, between the operator URL and the I think is it Aditi or Navendu? Navendu, if you go back up to where the Meshery namespace is, right there, yeah, line 148. So Aditi, where we're, and I don't know if this might be an older copy of the code. I don't know, but on line 148, if Meshery is deployed in a namespace,
committed to the repository and now they have been pushed, right?
Excuse me.
And over here you can see the message.
I don't think
commit, which was first commit adding 1.txt and 2.txt.
I don't think you're sharing your terminal
over here. Here are the files.
and what was I gonna,
txt had the content hello world, so it's being reflected here.
Yep,
Similarly,
I don't think you're sharing.
.txt, I can see that it says.
Oh, and Stephen, I don't know if are you talking to us, because what's being shared right now is a web browser.
Yeah, I am. I don't see his instructions. I just see what he's sharing on his desktop.
Oh, I see.
That is a modified.
I don't see his terminal.
Into my Git repository. So what I do is I type.
Oh, like I'm actually not sharing my terminals.
Yeah, Amia, I don't know what terminal you're referring to either.
Well, when he's talking about Git and adding and this whatnot in his terminal window, I assume it's Bash or something. I'm not seeing that.
Right. Yeah, in the chat, Amia is talking about something else. I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean,
okay.
I follow what he's saying.
I think he's just talking a very long distance, and I assume he was saying about some terminology. I think the voice is very low. He's talking from loud. If he can be a little bit more clear, that would be great.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I guess to help get us onto the same page, the reason that there isn't a terminal being shared is because there isn't a terminal being shared, or like the folks aren't talking about that, but there is a web browser being shared that's open to a pull request. The pull request is talking about how to make sure that the command Meshery CTL system stop works for.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. I'm kind of hearing you over the top of him, but I don't think he's hearing me at all. So who knows? I don't know.
Oh, gotcha. I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. Right now, is my voice the only voice?
No, I hear the gentleman sharing in the background also, Navendu, but I don't think he hears me at all. He's just talking. I'm actually not talking. This is my voice.
Oh yeah, you know what it is. It might be. Double check on your other browser tabs if you would, Stephen. It might be that there's a YouTube video that's got the sweet sounds of Navendu coming through.
And let's check
And
whether
I could hear that burst too. So
this is a step I've already.
And so, um, fair enough. Totally understandable about the confusion then. So, so cool. Aditi, I conflated two things. I think like the name of the app called Meshery, and then the name of the namespace. And like you were saying, you're not in so much as you can tell at the moment, we may not have an issue with how the namespace is being referenced because what you have configured, what you've coded up is something of a centralized reference to the Meshery namespace from the utils.
Helpers, yes.
Yeah, good. So now that I've totally confused this, so do you know where the utils getting the Meshery namespace from by using Meshkit, and like, is that being constantly updated, or how do we know for sure what that value is?
It's hard coded currently. Meshery in Meshery CTL itself.
Oh, okay. That sounds like
Ac-
something.
Actually, in this PR, this getting service endpoint and these 2-3 lines are extra. So I'll just push a commit now, removing these. I just realized I'm not using them. Yeah, even this thing, even endpoint is extra. It just starts from operator URL. I'll just push that.
Cool. And yeah, minimally, it would be a step forward to centralize operator URL into like wherever we're storing this.
Utils, yes. Okay.
Yeah. That does, so Aditi, that's probably not the end of that it's probably the end of that PR. I mean, but it's probably not the end of that particular conversation.
All right.
Abhishek had been openly pondering use cases around the lifecycle management of Meshery operator. And I think part of those use cases, it looks like you're addressing here, that might have been at his direction. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it looks like this is accounting for the dismantling of Meshery operator. So it's taking down the operator as well.
Taking down, is it?
As in like deleting.
Okay. Oh, okay. That way, yeah.
And so, Aditi, if you don't mind, because I think, because we run ourselves in circles on this, do you mind, or Abhishek, do you mind having a quick conversation with Aditi about life cycle of Meshery operator when the system stop command is run, so we can make sure that Meshery operator is being torn down as well?
I'll contact Abhishek and set up a time. Is he on this call?
Oh, I guess not. I thought it was.
No, yeah. I'll contact him. Life cycle of Meshery operator, right?
If you would, yeah, please.
All right. I'll text him. Thanks.
Anybody else have feedback other than confusing feedback from me? Couple of things that this thing Meshkit was mentioned a few times, and it's a library that Aditi is using. And so there's a link there to a blog post that one of the maintainers has written about Meshkit and what its purpose is. So if that's helpful.
Yeah, so I guess we should move on to the next item. We have a couple of newcomers on call today. So we have a tradition where we kind of embarrass the newcomers. So I will leave up to Khan and Amara to introduce themselves, guys.
Hi.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can go. My name's Kai. I'm a computer science student, undergrad at NYU. I recently heard Meshery through one of my professor because currently working with him on distributed tracing. So just take a peek at the repository and yeah, just find some new issue and just kind of try my hand at it. So yeah.
Yep, that's awesome. That's good. You tell Anirudh that he's expected on these calls as well. So I don't. He's being a lazy bum.
Oh,
You'll have to.
yeah.
You'll have to.
He did mention about you guys to us during our meeting. Yeah.
Did he mention sarcasm as well?
No,
Or,
no, 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 no.
or
We're talking about layer 5 and how we can integrate things.
that's cool. Yeah. By the way, just to help folks get to know Khan a little bit, some of the areas of focus for well for I don't want to speak on Khan's behalf explicitly, but just his professor and kind of general area of focus. At least one of the things is a really intriguing set of questions being asked about distributed tracing and the sampling algorithms or the approaches to sampling and the efficiency of sampling of traces. Tracing as a telemetry signals is very insightful, probably answers more questions than metrics answer. And depends on what questions you're asking. Maybe tracing answers more questions than logs do, but you've got your triumvirate of those three signals, and tracing is expensive, and that's based on how largely like how many spans you have in a trace and how many traces you're generating and how you're sampling those and storing those, and it gets costly. And so there's a lot of intriguing thought to be put into the approach by which you sample and doing it intelligently. And so I can't wait to nerd out on some of that, some of those topics, because that's pretty interesting. And I do think that there is a lot of I'm pumped that you're here, Colin. I didn't know that was where you were coming from, but that's yeah. There's a few areas to point out to you that may be of interest. So yeah. Now I understand why you moved through those PRs so quickly. So that makes sense. Cool, great. Now that we've embarrassed Khan, on to embarrass Amara. Welcome. Please take a moment to introduce, if you would. And if your audio isn't working, feel free to use the chat. Unless Amara isn't on anymore. And so yeah, back to you. Oh, I guess Khan is up. So
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think the latest PR addressed the issue of listing all contexts, all given context in a config file. So, which is, yeah, I think it was fairly straightforward because all the other files kind of constructed similarly, and it's like the command line. So I'm pretty new to Go, so all the syntax of Go is interesting to me. But yeah, I should fix the based on some suggestion, I should fix it, and then it should be good, I think.
nice. Navendu, did you happen to, or Khan, is there we don't have the output of what that looks like by chance?
I guess I have a mock-up here.
Oh, okay. And I think, yeah, okay, this is interesting. Like, yeah, this actually calls to one of the things that I was wondering if, Khan, if you might have included. And it's that first piece of information about the user's current context. Do we denote that in any way? Do we tell them that like this, or do we denote that in any way with? Because in concept, while this isn't true all of the time, in concept, most of the time, the user will be within a current, it will be in a context and maybe moving between them, creating them or deleting them or switching between them. So it's possible that they're out of context, like they don't have an active context, the current context. But so Con, I guess the question is, when there's a list given, do you tell the user what the current context is?
Context list. Yeah. Well, I'm just extracting it based on the YAML file that.
Yeah.
So if that is set, then it will tell them the current context.
Right.
I think based on the latest, I pushed the latest commit, but the latest commit should list all available context and tell them to switch if they don't have the current context set. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, let me push it real quick.
Nice. Does anyone else have feedback for Con on this? So we're starting to get a fairly consistent set of verbs against these commands. One of the verbs being list.
That's good work, Khan. So yeah, I guess you made the changes that we mentioned. Yeah, I think it looks good. Yeah. So I guess we will move on to the next item. Husseina, are you on? Or
It's interesting. There's a lot
should
of
we?
there's a fair number of people on, just none of these people.
Husseina actually mentioned that she might be late, so I guess we will move it down. So I guess I'm up. So this is about the Meshery CTL perf command. We kind of had a discussion about this last week, and I have made some improvements based on some suggestions. Uh, on top of what we have now, we will have a run sub command, which will run the performance test, and we will also track the user's performance profile on the Meshery config, that is the config.yaml file. So this is a mockup of what the config file will look like. So the user can have multiple different performance profile, and they can reference it by name on their context. So when the user runs a performance test, by default it will check the current context, and it will check the performance profile set in the current context, and the user can have different values here, configure his test. And another thing is that we will add we will have flags where the user can override all these set values. So if they run Meshery CTL perf run and add a URL flag, then they can override their current their URL of their current profile, and similar for all other values. Uh, yeah, and I would like to get some feedback on how to. Yeah, is this okay or?
While other people are pondering this, I'm going to bring up a terminal just to help us explore a little bit. So we should be seeing a terminal now. So I guess to help give Devendu some feedback, he's looking at adding a verb called run to the Meshery CTL perf command. Couple of things to note. One, here's what we have for Meshery CTL perf today. Perf, like when you start to look at the structure of the commands that are laid out for Meshery CTL, it's we're developing a nice pattern. And as a matter of fact, we try to categorize not only do we try to have a pattern by which we're saying Meshery CTL noun, some noun, and then some verb. Not only are we trying to follow that sort of hierarchy, there's also something of a categorization that's going on. So if we just look at Meshery CTL top level, the categorization right now, the top level items are, well, yeah, I guess a few nouns, system, pattern, mesh, perf. This is an abbreviation, performance. Now that's performance, could be, yeah, I guess, yeah, noun, right? Yep. Anyway, so today the behavior is such that if the user wants to run a performance test, there's no verb necessary. They just do Meshery CTL perf, and they supply either a string of flags indicating what type of performance test they want to run, for how long, against what endpoint, or more simply, they just provide a service mesh performance compatible file. So a file that's of the SMP format. And that's a little bit, easier. But as new functionality like performance profiles have been released just this last release, well, one, bringing forth new constructs like that necessitates changes in the command structure. Two, to help provide a consistent user experience. Having a verb after the noun here is probably a good thing, because at some point someone's going to want to list out what performance tests they've run and see a list of those. They may want to at some point view a specific result set, or look at not only the result set from an individual test that's been run, but they also might want to get the details of their performance profile. And those things are kind of hierarchical in nature. There's anytime that you have a test result, that test would have been run in context of a performance profile. And so that's where Navendu is coming from. So run is Navendu sounds like that's the current thinking about the particular verb to use to run a performance test. Okay, that for us humans, that seems to be sensical. When we reflect, or when we talk about consistency and consistency driving quality of user experience, so we've got one or two other productive commands. So one of those commands being used elsewhere is apply. Another command being used elsewhere is create. These are additive or positive, or have positive results. So you want to create a performance test. Well, maybe if you wanted to create a performance profile, because a profile is a static thing. It's a collection. It's a description of the type of test you want to run. Okay, but to invoke the test and run the test as an active thing, yeah, create maybe isn't the nicest of. Apply is also, yes, like it kind of crosses the boundary. If you use kubectl a lot, apply sort of crosses the boundary between potentially creating a static definition of something like a profile, or taking that definition and having it realize. So if you do kubectl apply dash F, you can take a static definition and have kubectl or Kubernetes instantiate that object. So just thinking aloud with you here, Nuvendu, I don't know that I had a specific answer. I think one of the considerations to reflect upon is at some point, if there are 30 commands, like 30 different areas. So today there's this many, but as it grows, that those that are unfamiliar maybe with a pattern, to the extent that they're familiar with Meshery CTL perf and they're listing out those results, they get used to that verb, they might switch over to the pattern and say, well, geez, what's going on? What are these anyway? And they go to list that. They go to just find common user experience. So it becomes intuitive after a time. And so that intuitiveness reinforces consistency of, and so part of my point here is just an open thinking about the use of the word run. And while it, like, I think when you consider it just myopically unto Meshery CTL perf alone as an individual command, run sounds pretty great. Like that's very descriptive of what's going to happen. But when you consider it that there might be, 20, 30 something commands, and they each have, the more verbs that we have, the harder it is to kind of learn and familiarize with the CLI. And so reflections and thoughts on that from anybody? What's that? So what would I propose as an alternative? That's a great question. I don't know. Let's explore that. So if we did perf apply dash F, that might get us there. Does that feel entirely awkward to anyone if you invoke this command and a performance test was run? You might not be applying a file in this case. You might be doing something much more convenient around the performance profile. So Nuvendu right now, do you recall what you have proposed for the interfacing with the profiles? Are those just more implicit to what perf is, or is the word profile coming out here as well?
No, we actually use only the list and view commands.
So profile becomes like innate to perf. So you're so that okay?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so what just at least from the design that you have right now, the collection of verbs that we would have here, we would have
the run and view and list.
okay.
And yeah, and to like the list and view commands can be used for like viewing the whole performance profiles, all the performance profiles, uh, or like the individual results, or yeah. But it may need some reconsideration as we are moving into like we are adding the performance profile consideration in the config.yaml file. So some changes might be needed.
Currently, is this the case that you would, if you wanted to run a specific, invoke a test using a specific performance profile, is this the order of syntax, or does the verb come and then the name of the profile? Or should I go read the design spec? And stop being lazy.
Actually, like for right now we don't need to like we specify the since the performance profiles are specified in the config file, we would just need to call the run command or run command and we can change the profile with a flag. So that is what we have currently.
I see.
Uh, Now that I think about it, we may need a little bit more thought into this.
Yeah. Nice. Well, maybe we'll do a. So this brainstorming has been helpful, is what I'm hearing. Good. Or it's been disruptive. I don't know. It depends on how you want to phrase it.
Like one, well, I haven't used Perf a lot, so like my opinion is unbiased, I guess. When you did apply over there, what came to my mind is you are not invoking a test, you are just saving a file, and next time you run it, you will run that particular test, because that's what I'm used to in kubectl.
Yeah, I hear that. Although in kubectl, although like that makes sense to me, except for the last bit about kubectl, because if you do kubectl apply such
So yeah,
you know,
that okay.
which then you get the sock shop, or it'll actually
Maybe instead
instantiate.
of we can do perf run -f.
Yeah, there's mhm.
Did you have so it's now the noun, verb, and then is it a parameter after that?
It does. Yeah, I don't know if yes. I think sometimes those two words end up being interchangeable between like argument, like an argument with a global flag, rather, I guess is the parlance. Although having said that, there are exceptions to the rule at the moment. So if if we look at a different area of Meshery CTL system, this is a fairly this is a fairly decently done category of Meshery CTL capabilities. This family of commands, so system channel config. And so if we look at one of these like config, or rather context, I don't know. So there's Meshery CTL, there's the noun, kind of the area, the category. In this case, this ends up really being the category of things that we want to get into. We want to deal with Meshery as a system and talk to and manipulate Meshery and its deployment. And that's what's being, in some cases, that works very well. Like there's the noun, there's the verb, we're good to go. In other cases, it's like, well, yeah, we could start the entire system. But in other cases, like, well, I just want to tweak an aspect of what we've got going on here. Like I'd like to switch from the stable channel over to the edge channel. And so this is a valid command, and you end up with a couple of nouns, then a verb and an argument, or a parameter and argument. So it isn't strict adherence, not out of a desire not to be consistent, but just so Dhruv and Vijay, and in part why I'm going to give you this next suggestion, and I'll say this is in part why I was mostly trying to brainstorm, is because a lot like when feedback is given on a user interface in a web-based user interface, Meshery UI, it's easy enough to look at one area and say that font looks too small, like, or wouldn't black look nicer, or whatever it is. It was like, well, yeah, if that's all that you're looking at, yeah, you're right. Like that would just work better just for that section. But when you step back and you look at not just that page, but this screen and this screen, it's like, oh, well, that would be totally inconsistent. We shouldn't do that. And so therein lie the challenge for great design on, because this is the exact same thing. It's a user experience, and it needs to be consistent, um, and so part of my hesitancy anymore is giving a strong opinion about. I think that's actually why I'm calling out run specifically, is to say, wow, in context of performance tests, that sounds quite intuitive. In context of, but that's the only place that we use it. So there will be a day where we need to add new types of verbs, like switch. This is a verb that actively switches the user real time from that to it'll restart Meshery and move you over. Like it does a specific thing, and it was necessary. Like if you were to apply edge or create edge, like those things didn't. So we needed to bring forth this new verb. While the verb isn't used ubiquitously, it's still appropriate. And that's the kind of scrutiny I think that I encourage all of us to give to something like run. It's like, hey, it may be the moment in time where we do need to create a new verb, because it is a different, it is distinct from how these other verbs are being used today. And it's not like, it's not like we need to necessarily rule this with an iron fist, or like that. We should have as few verbs as possible, and it should all be like, I don't know that that's going to be really helpful either. Like, because if you have a fluctuation of behavior when you use the same verb but with different commands, and you get a little bit of fluctuation of behavior, like, well, that's bad, because that's inconsistent as well. And so my encouragement is to go read through Navendu's spec, because in order to get it right, there needs to be a holistic consideration, I think, across the. And it's gonna, by the way, your noodle will get tickled, because there are multiple concepts being included in perf, profiles, and results. And the ability to create some static profiles, a definition of something, to look at something historically that has transpired, look at results from different runs, and then also to invoke those runs. And so it's a totally surmountable task. It's just why we have to write it down into a spec to reflect on it. So Vijay or Dhruv, do you guys have any other thoughts on this before we? Dhruv smells kubectl inspiration. That's nice. Cool. Back, Nivendu, back to the agenda. If you, Nivendu, we might be having trouble with your audio. I don't know.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I guess we will move on to Abhishek, but I don't find him on the call. So let's move to Utkarsh.
Gosh.
Okay. So let me share my screen. Although I don't have much to show, it's just an API endpoint that I'll be showing this right now. So while I'm trying to share the screen, basically what I'm trying to show in here, and that basically I'll be showing is basically I'm working on the ability of Meshery so that it can start importing Meshery patterns from GitHub. That's something that I'm targeting right now. So what exactly importing from GitHub means? Basically, you can create Meshery patterns for yourself. That is, so if you would, if you would go to Meshery today, you may find something like this if you log in with the right provider. So you can see some patterns in here. These patterns have been imported from the local file system. This is functional feature right now. You can use it. But what's being worked on right now is the ability to add, basically import these patterns from GitHub or other providers. Definitely a part of consideration. But right now, the PR that I've created, if I can find it. So I've created a PR in Meshery as well as in the provider. which basically enhances Meshery with the ability to import patterns from GitHub. This is the open PR. If someone is interested, they can take a look in here. This is the endpoint that I have added. So what you can do right now is if you would go and sign in with GitHub, it will ask for permission because we have to basically increase the scope so that we can actually gain access to repositories. Right now, basically, if you would go and try to log in through GitHub. Once the PR has been merged, you would get this screen. You can authorize Meshery so that it can gain access to your repositories and can start importing patterns from there. Now, if you would, so because the UI hasn't been worked on, so what I'd be sharing is an endpoint, a very new point. Uh, I hope this makes sense though. So yeah. So I have actually a private repository called Meshery Patterns. This repository doesn't have much things in it. Let me quickly share what exactly it has. Yep, it has only 3 files, which I just drop in here so that I can test a few things. So what I'm trying to do in here is I'm specifying that, hey, the provider that I want to import from is github.com. This is the owner. You can specify the organization also in here. And then this is the repository name and this is the path. This path can be could be of any depth. That is, you can specify that go to this directory and this directory and this directory. And what Meshery would do is basically import the pattern from there. It will also ensure that the pattern is a pattern. I mean, it complies with the structure that we have defined for patterns, and it will import it for you. So this is basically the response that we got. This is the pattern that I tried to import, and here it is. It was not much of a visual treat, I guess, because it was just an API endpoint. Still, if someone has this is actually still an open PR. If someone okay, change. This is still an open PR, so someone can take a look in here. Because this is a very early feature, so it's still in development, still in consideration. That is, so a few things that I'm considering right now is ability like introducing a generic HTTP endpoints, so that not only from GitHub, you should be able to import from somewhere else also, and the and the ability to basically go and look at previous versions of the file. So yeah, these are some things that are in consideration. So it just was giving the extra details. So any feedback?
Comments for Utkar?
So are we saving this pattern files, or it is just getting the pattern files and showing if it is valid or not?
Right now, how the endpoint works is basically it saves it. I mean, instead of just showing you, it will save it for you. So if I would, I'm not sure. So basically, if you would go and try to list your patterns now, you would actually see it in the okay. Actually, I have some privileges issues, so it won't show in here. But yeah, trust me on the words that yeah, it will basically store these patterns for you.
Got it. Nice. I do trust you.
Thank you.
Adina, you had a question?
Yeah, but I would prefer to hear the feature presentation and what was implemented because it's a little bit of a blurry question. That's
Oh, sure. Yep, sure.
Not that I would prefer. I don't want to
derail.
Get. Yeah, exactly.
Sideswipe, sidetrack. Make bad jokes. Okay, good. Utkarsh, the mechanism or the criteria by which the to be imported file is verified as being compatible?
Yeah, so basically, so the, so what happens is we have, so it's the code basically that is responsible for verifying this. So we have already defined the structs which are which represent the pattern file. So when I basically sent a get request to this particular path, it went to the provider and it fetched the file from GitHub, and then it kind of verified these bytes, because this data was in bytes, and then it verified that against the struct. And because it didn't fail, I mean, had it been failed, it would have complained that this thing that you tried importing is not a pattern file. Uh, but because it was a valid pattern file, so it just worked.
Is there, so this is the contents of the pattern, or the pattern file, makes tons of sense. With respect to the import process, what additional metadata is being tracked about the file, the pattern? Like,
So in general, or only in the context of importing files?
In specific to, I get, well, geez, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's kind of both, but it's here's a specific example in question is the location from which someone has imported the file, is that retained as metadata about the pattern?
No, right, because all of these. So when you no, so the short answer is no. That no other metadata gets stored right now. The reason is actually these when you import these pattern files, they just become part of the pattern files that you already had. So had they been import from file system or GitHub or somewhere else, maybe in future. So it doesn't differentiate at that moment, but this could be a requirement in case you want to start tracking, that is the version history, something like that. In that case, we would need that where this came from, so that we can get to the previous one.
To ponder that out loud with you for a moment, if there was a location value or piece of metadata that was that was tracked for to identify the genesis of any of the patterns that Meshery has actively loaded at any given time. Let me speak to what those values might be, and then speak to the value of having that type of metadata. So if there was a location field that was an attribute of any pattern, sources of input or sources of where patterns come from are at least, like at the moment, it seems like are from local file system. So if there was a location attribute, that would be like the path to that on the file system at the time. If it was imported from GitHub or another generic HTTP endpoint, like that URL would be the value of the location. I think there's there's only other like a third way that people can. Well, then I take it back. There's two other ways that people can get pattern files, or there's three other ways. Fine, in which people can get pattern files into Meshery. So one of those is, I believe that this is. You have to correct me, Utkarsh. People who are using Meshery now, should everybody be seeing patterns in their UI, or is this a feature flagged thing? Is this an experimental thing that's yet to be exposed?
For mission provider, it's still experimental, so not everyone will be able to see it. Only developers is that
okay.
feature. But for local provider, it's generally available.
Okay. So okay, good. Anyway, so some of you have seen this, but in the Meshery UI, you might see a menu item called patterns, and it's what Utkarsh has demoed a few times. You'll see a table listing of those patterns, and it's just YAML files that you can upload and edit. And so you can, so my point is, the other location from which a pattern can be loaded is visually here so that a user clicks. Well, I guess I take it back. So even here, we don't allow the ability to copy and paste. You can't create a file by copying and pasting, but you can edit a file by copying and pasting. So I take it back in terms, I was going to say one of the initial locations could just be a copy and paste in the UI. But another location is as mesh map as a visual topology is worked on, someone may design a new topology of their service mesh deployment, visually. They'll interconnect things and they'll configure how they want their mesh to run, how they want their workload to run. And I don't think it's been demonstrated in this venue yet, and maybe we should soon, is the ability to visually design your service mesh, save that design, and when you save it, to have it saved as a pattern file. So that would be, so in terms of like the location, that location attribute, that just might be another HTTP endpoint to mesh map, or that might be a value called mesh map. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so whatever those values are, what's the point of tracking that attribute? Why do we need to have the location of the pattern? Does anybody want to answer that? By the way, Jubril asked a great question in chat. From my perspective, I think the answer is yes. The reason that you might want to track location is, so part of the reason that Utkarsh is bringing forth the ability to import a pattern file from GitHub is because, well, if you're serious about managing your infrastructure and particularly doing it as code, then if you're going to invoke, apply a pattern and over time you tweak it, well, you might want to keep a revision history of that, or you might keep your manifest files and your pattern files in a source control system. And so it makes sense that that makes intuitive sense. As we go to do a one-time import, I would posit that that's not a one-time thing. Like the initial import is sort of, you might use the term one time, but it's really an ongoing communication that we would ultimately, probably want to be aware of or facilitate, or at least let people, whether or not Meshery does anything about it, just at least give them that additional metadata, because it becomes useful to distinguish. Because right now it's, unless I had foresight to giving the best file names to my patterns, it might not be enough distinguishing information. I might not have been verbose enough in my file naming to really call out the fact that, like, I had a bunch of different Istio rollouts and what their difference is, so that I could see that without having to open it up and get some, But if I knew what the location was, if it was in a different folder, it was like, okay, while I was lazy and used the same file names across them, if I can see the location of where they were pulled from and they were in different folders or different locations, like that would be an indicator to me. So moreover, if you want to re-import something, it could be part of what Meshery's intelligence could do would be to tell you, that to stay in sync with that potentially, or to tell you that your pattern files are out of date with your source control system, but it can't do any of those things if it doesn't have the location. So I've said my piece.
I just wanted to say something. It looks like when you say that, you're in some way referring to requirements. And so at a particular time, when you have a particular requirement, you're generating or coming up with this new pattern file. And so I was thinking, is it possible to have like a notes field where you can specify the reason why you have this new version? It may be called that, or maybe I'm saying something that's not relevant here, but I just wanted to say that.
Utkarsh, does that make sense?
it kind of did. I'm not exactly sure if I completely got it though. So, what was the situation like that? In, we, we should add a new field called location that we can track the metadata regarding the pattern file. And I think the solution, which is solution was that we also include a new field which includes the data why that pattern file was introduced or why that was important first. Was that the solution?
I mean, what was the reason for having a new version, for having a source control? Because you're bringing up the source control because there is a change, there is a new version, and what is the reason for the new version? Is it like you're saying, that there is a change to the infrastructure, right? And so there's a change to the infrastructure because there has been a change to the requirements. Maybe I'm dragging this out too far afield, so I think we can just let it go.
No, no, Vijay, there's some good things to tease out of that. There's some unique and differentiating things that I'm frankly like astonished that you don't see this prevalent in other places. I've only seen it 2 other places. I'll describe it very quick. It's funny actually, because those that coined the term GitOps, I don't see this from them, and I described it to them. They got excited about it 3 years ago, and they still haven't done it. So, but we're going to do it, and it's in part based on the fact that we're doing this. And what we're going to do is provide context to what you just said. And there's a couple of ways of interpreting, I think, what you just said. But one of the ways in which I do is that. The static nature of your patterns, that this is a descriptor of how you want your infrastructure running. Your infrastructure may or may not be running like this. You may, and hence, in large respect, like the core concept to part of what Kubernetes does, which is just a big fat reconciliation loop of like, here's the description, please make that reality. Please keep reality in sync with the description. Just sit here and make it so. Well, there are various forces that affect changes to your infrastructure. Some of those are bugs in apps. Some of those are hackers hitting on your apps. Some of that is rolling out a new version of your app. Those things come from different vectors. And some of that is, and so that one of like rolling out a new version is like, you would think that would be an event that everyone on your team would be very well aware of. Like, hey, yeah, yesterday we released this next version. It's like, well, yeah, maybe they'll be aware of it. But when you have like, 50 microservices, 100 microservices running around, and, different teams of different, intentionally, and this is the whole purpose, is that they're releasing as and whenever they're releasing. And if they're a high performing team, like they're releasing like 6 times a day. I mean, they're like releasing all the time, and they should be. And it makes me nervous. I get really nervous when we're like 6 weeks without a Meshery release. I want for us to be releasing, even though this isn't a continuously delivered thing, is just reduces the risk as you release every time. And my point is tracking that event. If you're going to do GitOps, if you tracking that event and understanding that your versioning system is supposed to be representative of your the reality of what you're actually running, there's a lot of opportunity in there to provide users with insights about not just current CPU and memory consumption, more like how those are highly related to, and in fact, directly impact the static description of your infrastructure in code, and that you could go back in time and look at the different versions of that code, and maybe go back in time and look at the different versions of, go back in time and look at your performance history over time as well, and show that here was an event that was V1 of your app. Here was the performance of what was happening. V2, V3, here was these events, showing them, and who to blame, because who made that code change? Clearly, that's usually an event use. And then therein lie a significant opportunity, hence in part why you're going to want to have ongoing interaction with, you want to get really friendly with your Git-based system or your source code system. so that you can blame developers for everything that goes wrong. I don't know if that's in part where you're getting to, Vijay.
Well, that
Yes.
was part of my side question. I can actually, yeah, I can say I don't. Whatever. If I'm doing wrong, just write me in the chat, Adina, you're wrong. Don't do it again. I don't want to reformulate your wording and put my words on it. So when the guys, you guys before presented on the perf and on the patterns, it was great, and the advancement is great and so on. But there are two different perspectives where you can see the things from the development and feature implementation. This is how we went, and also the thinking how it's going to be used. I don't want the user. How is the user? It's the sort of the mindset. Okay, I have this deployment, so it's like the management of deployments or things like that you have in your mind. So for me, it would, I have like one question or two questions. It would be, one would be if it's already available. For sure it is. I just didn't look enough. Just to take out the source code and run and do exactly what is how, or at least one feature how it was presented today. This is advancement, or how we advance and so on. And the other one will be installing it in a setup. So what was presented before, you don't necessarily need to have what the cluster, the applications and things like that. It will be installing it because let's say I'm doing my normal deployment or stuff like that, and now I run the perf to see how it is behaving or something like that. When what I'm saying, the second perspective, it's the perspective where I'm taking granted what the guys built, and I'm just using it for the purpose of the deployment or for these things. It's invisible. Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was just playing around with the can. I didn't. Yeah. I totally get what you. Yes. You're hitting on. If I'm getting you correctly, you're striking on a lot of the value that Oh yeah. Thank you. By the way, everybody, we're like 10 minutes after. So if you got to go, no offense, please go. We'll see you next time. The quick value is that, yeah, you want to trust but verify with your developers that you assume that they haven't regressed in terms of performance for what they're doing, or that when you're turning on a big service mesh feature that it's not going to slow the whole system down. So you might want some tooling like this to check on that for you as you go to do that deployment.
Yep. And it does. You know how to do it, to combine and so on. But for instance, for me, it's very hard to put the questions in a context for the one that implemented the Meshery feature, to understand where I want to go the.
Oh, yeah, do it. I would tell me about it.
And yeah. So I don't know how you do it, but yeah, it's been a year since I'm mostly on the meetups, on the meetings, and you go ahead. So also the developers and so on. If we isolate this too much, then the gap it's bigger. But if it's isolated, it's faster on how they are working. So for me, it would be, so what I want is to install and run, like development mode, and then also to see, I don't know if we have how I get the beta thing, or how I get how I can if we have the edge release. I think we have it or something like that, and just run it that one without thinking on the development or.
Yeah.
And then let's say we can say, okay, on this feature we actually need other 3 features like this. This is great. This one I have no opinion, and so how it was presented right now, for example.
I see. Yeah, I think the second part of our, if I interpreted it right, like the first part of what you were discussing was kind of the merits of the merit of the functionality that Meshery can offer to users, and
Yes.
so tying the context together and between static stuff, what's running, and then the performance of it as well, and kind of the whole like the utility that Meshery can offer. And then this second bit of what you're saying is, I think you're reflecting upon the manner in which this community, like when we get together, the sequence by which we demonstrate things to show progress and get feedback, that like there's a little bit of tooling today that helps facilitate making that a little easier with the edge channel, which is what you were calling out. And were you, and then take me from there, were you suggesting a change, or were you just sort of asking for clarification on what that procedure is?
I have a gap at this moment. I understand what is presenting and so on, but I cannot go in practice or where I can use it. I'm
right.
I
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, Adina, we're kind of missing that. And actually, that's a great point about a lot of the.
So before it was before, let's say 6 months ago, it was the other way around. And I have the scenario. So performance, I know where to do it, but not how it is right now. So I understand everything was presented. I don't know where to apply it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, that highlights, I think, two things, or at least two things, three things. Like one is when you go to the docs, is there a service mesh patterns, a guide to using service mesh patterns, and that explains the concept and kind of walks you through an example of like what a pattern is and why you would use it? No, there's nothing written in the docs about this stuff. So like that's a gap, one. And then two, if you as a integrated community member you're being asked to provide feedback and to facilitate that, if you to make that easier for you to actually go do the thing, well, there are certain aspects of what's developed here, like when someone's updating the docs, that great, there will be a preview of what that change is. It will be built, and then a URL will be given so that all of us can go by real quick. We don't have to go check it out, build it, run it, open it up. You can just click the link, see what the change was, give some feedback. The same type of a thing can be facilitated with like Meshery CTL changes. Every time that someone checks in a change about the command line interface, a build happens and a binary is produced. Where's that binary? Like, why don't, and like we can totally take that binary and make it available right there on the PR that says, click to download the binary that was built if you want to test out this new change that this person did, so that you can offer up feedback so that feedback is facilitated. That's possible, and it's just missing today. Like we should do that. That's a good CI centric thing for us to, that would just help with reviews. And like that's part of it. And then I think the third component that I don't know if this is explicitly what you're saying, but I think I would give us an F on is the marketing centric, like user facing, like, hey, you're looking at Meshery and your question is, thank you, Navendu. Your question is, what should I do with this thing now? I see you're saying it has a lot of capabilities, but is there like a guide? Is there a couple of example things I'm supposed to go do?
Yeah, I have a real example from today, from my work today. That's why but yeah, that's the question actually. Yes.
Okay.
I have a situation where it seems that it might be used, and the solution I went with, the infrastructures, the sys support and so on, they have no clue, and the developers only understood the part of it. So I put the YAML file in Git, and okay, we create, when you do on app number 1 on the stack number 2, you do a release. You also update the YAMLs here and so on, but make sure where it's the deployment and so on, there is only one place where everything gets synchronized. And they applied the changes from 2 places. So
yeah,
one developer applied the changes from another part I didn't have time to discuss, and the other one was, oh no, we don't need to apply. So going to the same resources, but from 2 places with the same names.
yeah. Painful.
And there is another request that we need to run whatever performance on whatever, and like, yeah, on what, on on what, on the air and so on. So for sure there is, the context is good, because I can see already like there is requirements.
Right. Yeah. People
But
are suffering.
yeah, so what you said, yeah, it was perfect what you said. Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't comment back.
Good. Okay. Fair enough. All right. We're.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Very good. Talk to everyone soon. We're 20 minutes over. We'll catch you guys shortly. Bye all. See you guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.